All right. Can you hear me now? All right. So we are in a growth industry. The growth we experience is not going to slow down anytime soon because we're living in an aging population. Baby boomers, every day people are turning 60, every day people turn 65, every day people get injured. So this growth right here is going to continue into the foreseeable future. Moravia Health and Frank Igwe, and this will make more sense as the presentation goes on. Moravia Health and Frank Igwe are the same. We're the same people. It's an agency, but it reflects who I am. So to understand Moravia Health, you actually have to understand my upbringing. Thank you so much. As you can probably tell from my last name, I'm a product of Nigerian parents, right? Raised in London, spent a few years in Nigeria before coming to America. And the interesting thing about the Nigerian culture is there's this overemphasized stress on education, right? So ever since I was a kid, from the time I was 2, 3 years old, it was stressed by family, by friends, and just random Nigerian people I'd meet at parties. As a kid, you're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna be a lawyer, you're gonna be an engineer, right? Every Nigerian kid goes through this experience. It's a form of brainwashing, but in a good way. That's not a negative. I'm not saying that it's actually a great thing because our parents, for the most part, are safe, they're conservative. They want a good life for their kids. So they figure if you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer, you're gonna be able to one day get a good job and take care of your family and live a good life, right? So here I am, straight out of central casting, right? BS in engineering, master's degree, 2 Ivy League schools, PhD here at Penn State. So I was on this path, right? I've been on this path since I was 3 years old. So I was just walking in the step that was laid out for me. Up until IST, now this is where things change. And I always tell people when I see my professors, Lynette Cavasny, Andrea Tapia, up until IST, my life was on a certain, I was doing numbers, I was crunching equations. I was doing formulas. There was a point I could actually solve this equation with ease, right? I was strictly quantitative. Numbers, formulas, equations, crunches, do this, do that. That's all I did. But while I was working on my PhD here at IST, I was talking with Allison, your professor. I took a class with Andrea Tapia. Did you take the same one with her? Right. So for the first time, keep in mind I'm a quant guy. I'm a numbers dude, right? All of a sudden, I'm learning these social theories of technology, institutional theories, structuration, social shaping of technology, technological determinism, and Karl Marx's theory of alienation. Real quick, does anybody know what the essence of Karl Marx's theory of alienation is? Has anybody ever heard of it? All right, so let me explain, let me give you the essence in like a quick 2-minute spiel. And this is how Andrea described it to us in class. And if you have a chance, does everybody here know Andrea Tapia? If you get a chance, talk with her and she'll explain it in more detail. But the way she explained it to me, a numbers guy, a quant guy, was if I was a carpenter in 1830, and let's say I'm molding this lectern right here. In 1830, I'm doing everything by hand. I'm pouring everything I have into this lectern, right? So I work on it for like 2 months. And when the lecturn's finished, the lectern reflects me because I put everything I had into building this lectern. So when you see, you can almost see my signature because I put my whole soul into making this thing beautiful, okay? Fast forward to 2016, same carpenter, same lectern. But instead of me doing it on my own, this thing is coming down a conveyor belt, right? And instead of carving it, the only thing I do all day long is put one screw right here. One screw, the next one comes through. One screw, the next one comes through. One screw. So at the end of the process, you still have the same lectern. But since I didn't pour myself into the lectern in 2016, I don't recognize it because I didn't pour myself into it. The only thing I did was put one screw into this thing. So the lectern in a weird way becomes alien to me because I don't recognize, I didn't pour myself into it as I did in 1830. Right? So it's like there's no affinity for what you create. And Karl Marx said when you work in your life, whatever you do, whatever your career is, it should be in a way, it should be in a field where you can express who you are, right? In 1830, if I was working as a carpenter, I could express myself in my work as a carpenter building that. In 2016, if it's just a conveyor belt, there's no way. It's like it doesn't reflect who I am. So for me, hearing that in Andrea Tapia's class was mind-blowing, right? I mean, I'm not sure how many quant people we have in here, but to me it was life-changing. Because for the first time I realized I didn't necessarily have to do number crunching all day long. And I was good at it. I mean, I'll be honest, I was good. I just didn't have real passion in it. It was just something I was doing to, you know, make a living for myself. So I took that class and my whole outlook on life changed. However, this was theory, right? I'm already knee-deep in my dissertation, right? I'm hearing this theory, but it's like, wow, I'm 20-something years old. I can't change now. I have to graduate in a year or so. So I graduate and off I go to work. I get this great job in business management consulting, 2008. Six-figure salary, great city. I love DC. Still go down there and visit from time to time. Great boss, great coworkers. Everything was perfect on paper, except I was miserable, right? Because my whole daily existence, and I was good. I was on the path upwards in the company, right? All I did every day was teach billionaire companies how to save $1 million here, $1 million there, $1 million there, right? So after a while, I just started questioning my whole existence. I would ask people, if I died tomorrow, would my legacy be that I taught these companies how to save $1 million? Is that what I'm here to do, right? So I hope you never go through this. I hope you never experience the fear. Let's go back a little bit. I hope you never experience the fear that you're on a path that was actually, you were put on by somebody else. Because remember that brainwashing as a child. Good brainwashing. But I realized when I was working in DC that this wasn't necessarily something I wanted to do for the rest of my life, right? Because once you enter in the workforce, you're on a path, you're on a trajectory. I mean, it's hard to get off that path once you start, right? If you want to be an MD, a doctor, you got to go to med school. You got to be, you know, you got to go through the rigors. You're on the path. If you want to be a politician, you started since student council, shaking people's hands and whatever else. Same thing with business management. Once you're in the field, it's quite difficult to say, okay, I want to become whatever if you haven't had that background. So that's where I am. I mean, imagine my mindset at that point, because I realized, wow, I'm stuck here for the next 30 years. So if we go back one slide, here I am, my career quadrant, right? There I am as a business management consultant. High profit, passion is low. So at that point, I decided I needed to save myself somehow, some way. So what I did next was I created a nonprofit called City ACES. City ACES stands for Athletes Changing Expectations. Worked with NFL athletes, NBA athletes, NCAA athletes. We reached thousands and thousands of kids. We pushed on them the whole value of education, stay in school, stay off drugs, stay out of trouble. We were on every major news outlet, NBC, CBS, ABC, ESPN, NPR, you name it, we were doing it. It was great, right? I mean, for the first time in a long time, I felt fulfilled. Like, wow, I'm doing something, man. Like my life, if I die tomorrow, at least I've touched somebody's life. I've done something of value. The only problem is, right, the only problem is it was diametrically opposed to the business management job I had in DC. Passion was high, and yet the profit was low, right? So I went from one extreme to the other extreme. Low passion, high passion, low pay, right? But the one thing I did notice from Moravia Health, it showed me for the first time that I wasn't stuck as a consultant. I could create something great. If I put my mind to it, I could free myself. Because keep in mind, I still feel like I'm trapped. I'm still working as a business management consultant, but I'm trying to figure out, okay, I'm testing. Is there something I can do? Can I create something that's great that will take me off this path? And even though City ACES wasn't successful financially, it was successful in every other aspect, but financially not so much. But it did plant that seed that, damn, Frank, you can do something. Just go back to the drawing board, create something that will have all the elements that you desire, but in the same vein would also create income. So that happened with City ACES. All right, so my parents, my mom and dad, they were worried about me at this point because here you have this kid with quote unquote all the degrees and yet seems like he's floating, like he's trying to find himself, right? But all this was necessary because rule number one, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you've got to know yourself. You have got to know yourself. What makes you tick? That sounds easy, right? It's an easy question, but it's hard to answer. Because in order to know yourself, you actually have to interrogate yourself. You have to take inventory of yourself, right? You've got to wrestle with yourself. Because there are parts of us that you might not, there are parts in our hearts that we don't want to go to. Everybody has dark spaces that you don't want to really examine or flash a light on. But if you want to be successful, you have to know yourself inside and out. What's your passion, right? So a lot of people, and I don't blame them, I mean, a lot of people are scared to go there. I mean, it's difficult, right? There's an old saying that if you know other people, that's wisdom, right? But to know yourself is enlightenment. And if you ever want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be enlightened. Simple, but it's deep. If you can really get a grasp of that, that will change your life. Step number one. All right, so step number two, it's not enough to have passion. Right? You've got to figure out, okay, how do I create something that society values? And when I say value, I'm talking cash, like something people will pay for. You could have a passion for something and society will say, okay, it's great you have a passion for it, but we're not paying you anything for it. I mean, you know, go fly kites, but we're not paying you to fly kites. So this is where the next step of thought comes in. And this is a second hard step, right? You have to ask yourself, when it comes to your passion, you're in this field, what is in this field that is needed but nobody else is doing, right? Again, this is where Penn State IST helped me. From the period of 2005, when was I here? 2005 to 2007, right? Do they still have that ITP triangle, information technology and people? Do they still do that? They still do that? Okay. From 2005 to 2007, every piece of literature written on information, technology, and people ever written in existence, yours truly read it, right? I read literally, it took 2 or 3 years, every single article, every single white paper, I knew it. And it was like right there in the top of my head, right? Working on my dissertation. And all that information that I learned about this one particular area was just to advance the body of knowledge by just an inch. If this whole room is everything known about information technology and people, I actually, after I read everything and I found out where the holes were, what was needed, what was the missing piece of information that I could add to this body of knowledge, the information I wrote my dissertation on really only moved that body of knowledge maybe just like half a foot, if this room was the entire body of knowledge, right? But in order to do this, in order to advance, see that half foot seems small, but it's significant, right? So this is a body of knowledge, I only moved it 1 foot. But in order to make that small leap or that small movement in knowledge, I had to know everything about technology, about people, about information. And when you know everything, you see where the gap is. Okay, they've talked about this, that, and that, but they haven't talked about this, this, and there. Same thing in business. Once you have your passion, you have to study. You've got to know everything about the field that you want to get into. Once you know everything about everything, you know where the gap is, right? You know where the gap is. Moravia Health is a home health agency. What did I learn about that? Why did I choose a home health agency versus other things? Because there's a thing, there was a few papers written that said where these baby boomers are getting older, but they don't want to go to nursing homes. They want to age in their home, right? But people were saying, I don't want to go to a nursing home, I want to stay at home, but there's no program to like allow me to stay at home. So the government created a program. It's quite obscure. A lot of people in Pennsylvania don't even know the program exists. But after I read all the information, I said, okay, this is one area where Moravia Health can exploit, can take advantage of, right? So I focused on one area, and that's what you should do in your business. Once you figure out what your passion is, once you figure out the area that you could actually add value, you focus on that thing like a laser, right? A lot of people, they want to do a million different things. I always tell people, don't be spread a mile wide, but an inch deep. Nah, you don't want to do that. You want to be an inch wide, but you want to go deep as hell. You want to go a mile deep. That's the key. Focus, specialize in one thing. Is everybody with me? Y'all with me? All right. All right. And so after you've studied everything, there does come a point where you're actually going to have to make a move, right? Because if you want to, you can always delay making the plunge or taking the plunge for another day. Oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. We got to wait until this, we got to wait until that, right? A lot of people I know would have been great entrepreneurs, but they suffered from paralysis by analysis, right? By the time they started to make a move, somebody else had already taken their place. There's the old story of the donkey, where there were 2 carrots on either side, and the donkey was placed right in the middle of the 2 carrots. And he couldn't decide which carrot to take, so he sat there in the middle and he starved, right? You don't want that to be you. At some point, you just have to make a decision. Like, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go for it. You're going to make mistakes, right? I mean, I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you and say it's going to be easy, right? You're going to make mistakes along the way, but you keep going. That's the essence of successful entrepreneurship. You have to make mistakes, but through the mistakes, you press, you persevere, right? You have to give yourself at least 5 years. This is the thing that kept me going over the years, because they would tell you most ventures, most startups fail after 5 years, right? So if you have in your head, I'm going to make it past 5 years regardless of what it takes, that's important, right? So again, it takes courage and it takes guts, right? So you're going to give the world this service or this product. You have to be able to introduce it to the world and be willing for the world to reject you. To be like, Jake, that sucks. Like, take it back. Don't ever bring that around me again. It takes courage. You have to be vulnerable, right? You have to be able to take that rejection if it comes. Some of you are going to design things that the world's just going to be like, wow, this is exactly what we needed. Off we go. That's it. More often than not, you're going to design something that people are like, yeah, not so much. I mean, it's okay, but it's not something I'm willing to, spend money on. At that point, you don't want to quit. You just want to come back with a better product, a better service. Because every time someone rejects you, it's an opportunity for you to learn, to make it better, right? You have to get uncomfortable. Now, this comes to matter of taste, right? I mean, it almost gets philosophical, right? I know who I am. I work best under pressure. I work best under stress, right? I come from the school of thought that uncomfortability fuels ingenuity, right? If you look in nature, if you want to see something, if you want to see an animal fight to the death, put it in a corner, right? And that animal will do things that you didn't think were possible. Same thing with human beings. If you're up against the wall and you say, this thing is going to work no matter what, you don't give yourself a mental out. You say, no matter what happens, this thing is going to work. Too many times I deal with people who say, well, I did a product, I did a service. It would have worked, but I only gave 75%. So if I'd given 90%, it would have worked. They gave themselves that mental escape. If I'd given just a few more, it would have worked. But since I didn't, it's okay. I'm not worried about it. You can't do that. You cannot do that. You have to put everything on the line, right? So when people say, what does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? It sounds crazy. By the time I need everything. You've got to get everything that you have, right? There's this Spanish explorer in 1519, Cortez. After they sailed from Spain to the New World, the first thing he did was have his men sink the ships. Burned them and sunk all the ships as soon as they crossed over the ocean. I mean, the reason he did that was obvious, right? Because now his men knew no matter what happened, you're not going back home. So really, you have to either sit here and fight and win, or you die, right? So it's the same thing with yourselves. You have to burn whatever mental ships you have in your mind. Don't give yourself a way out, right? It's difficult. I know it's difficult, but if this thing was easy, everybody would do it, right? I'm sitting up here talking, and I know not everybody's going to be able to take this, but this message isn't for everybody. Those are for the ones who actually really want to do this and who are 100% committed. It's a difficult message, but if you want success, this is what it's going to take, right? It's better to feel uncomfortable now than to live with a life of regret or resentment later. That's my philosophy. That's just me, all right? So this is how I burned my ship in the career quadrant. Left my job as a business management consultant, left the nonprofit alone, and I started living off savings. I didn't give myself a way out. Now, honestly, I wouldn't advise this. I'm just being real. I mean, quitting your job and quitting your nonprofit, it's not for everybody. However, we're taking risks here. We're not crashing cars. So even though I did that, it was a calculated risk. Because as a business management consultant, when I realized I had to get out of the situation, I was saving every check I got. I was saving money for years. Everything that came on, my friends would say, hey, Frank, let's go party. Not today, man. Let's go on a trip to, no, I can't do it. I saved every dime that I had, knowing that there was gonna come a time that this day would happen where I'd have to leave that business, have to leave the nonprofit alone, and then focus on what my passion was. All right, so that's what I did. After 2-3 years working as a consultant, I spent the next 2-3 years building Moravia Health, right? Also, what's important is you have to get support from family. You need a support system. My family that were behind me 100%, my friends as well. You can't do this thing alone. I mean, it's such a arduous undertaking that you need all the support you can get, right? Before you start your business, if possible, establish cash flow. Because everything I'm saying now means nothing if you don't have the money to get it going. But there are all kinds of resources you can get. For me, it was my savings. I built up a good reservoir of credit cards that I started tapping into. A lot of people take loans from the SBA, Small Business Association. They exist for people like you. Their whole reason for existing is to give people like you loans to start your own business. Something you should consider, right? When the business is up and running, I always tell people, learn everything about everything, right? That goes from answering the phones, how you want the phones answered, payroll, billing, marketing. Whatever it is about the business, you should know it backwards and forwards better than anybody else. And the reason is simple, because if you don't know how to do it, you don't know when the system is out of whack. If something is wrong, if somebody's doing something the wrong way and you don't know how it's supposed to be done, who's fooling who, right? That's a good way to have your business sync. Also have the right team around you. I mean, I've said it a few times already. This thing is so huge, the undertaking is so great that you can't do it, or you can't do it alone, right? Like I said, we have about 350 employees right now. Everybody is there doing a specific task. I need them all. I need every member of my team, right? You have to figure out what your superpower is. And then once you figure out your superpower, build your team around it. Your superpower is actually different from your passion. They're not the same. A lot of people confuse them. You could be passionate about kites, right? But you may not know how to build it. Someone like me, I'm passionate about helping people, but believe it or not, I'm shy. I was telling Jake this, I'm an introvert, right? But the business I'm in, it's a relationship business. So my superpower is actually identifying and organizing people. So knowing what my weakness is, I'm able to bring people, I surround myself with people who love people, who are extroverts, who know how to talk, who know how to walk people through the enrollment process, right? Again, it goes back to that whole thing about you have to know yourself. You have to know what you're good at, you have to know what your weaknesses are. I love this saying. This was so funny the first time I read it, because it's so true. Entrepreneurs are the only people who work 80 hours just so they don't have to work 40. I mean, it's a true saying, right? I mean, honestly, 80 hours for me in a week isn't enough. But the difference is, my 80 hours is like 5 hours for somebody who works a 9 to 5, right? Because the thing is, when your work and your play are the same thing, when you love what you do, when there's no distance between what you do for work and what you do for fun, which my business is, it's not work, right? Every morning I wake up and I'm like, let's go to work. That's when you know you're on the right path, right? But time is indeed your most precious asset. My days now with such a big organization, I don't do the mundane things anymore. My job is to, first of all, have the expertise to know how everything is supposed to be done, as I told you before, so I know when the system's out of whack. I lead and give the company vision, but as far as the day-to-day execution, I delegate that to my team. Going back to that superpower thing, I know what everybody is capable of. And so my job is to delegate the execution to them, right? Again, I'm giving you boilerplate, you know this. Set measurable goals. The reason why you need measurable goals is if you can't measure it, you can improve it, right? It's not something as simple as saying, oh, I want everybody to do X, Y, and Z. You have to have a system to measure it so you know when you're hitting your goals and when you're not. If you can't measure something, you can't improve it. Keep that in mind. That's key. We're almost done. Give me about 5 more minutes. Always insist on the truth, right? One thing when you start your own organizations, you'll learn this, and it just happens naturally, I guess. There's a bubble. If you're the boss, if you're the head of your company, people hold you at a higher standard. There's like a reverence. People are scared to come to you and tell you certain things because they're afraid how you react. So you have this bubble where sometimes if you're not careful, there are critical things going on with your company that you may not be aware of because people are scared to talk to you because you're the boss. So you have to create an environment where people can come up to you at any given time and say, hey, Frank, I think you really need to pay attention to that, right? Because in the beginning, one thing that happened with Moravia Health was we had employees who were so scared to tell me the truth of them drowning in some activity or something that they were working on. It wasn't until the whole thing fell apart that they're like, I was scared to tell you. And my whole thing as a leader is I have to cultivate that environment where you can come and talk to me. And you're going to be fine. I'm not going to bite your head off. Again, we're going over old territory here. Believe it, love it, have passion, right? People will follow you if they see you love what you do, right? My team will go through hell and high water for me because they know I believe it. As I'm sitting here talking to you, it's not just a speech. Actually, I just gave y'all my life because it's real to me, right? It's not work. It's not a game. I love what I do. And when people feel that, they want to be a part of that. They want to follow you because they're like, you know what? This guy is going somewhere I want to be too. Finally, have a faith system. Even if you're an atheist, that's fine. Just believe in something greater than yourself. Because honestly, this game that we're playing here, doing your own thing, it can get overwhelming. I'm not going to sit up here and say it's all blue skies and apple pies because that's not true. Because there are going to be some dark nights. There are going to be some dark days. And if you don't feel like you have somebody greater than you in your corner, it's easy to throw in the towel. It's easy to say, you know what? Why am I doing this, right? I could just go back to having my regular 9 to 5. Like, why am I even struggling? Why am I sitting here living off savings when I have a 6-figure job waiting for me? It's easy to give in, right? That ties in with be selective who you talk with, right? Success has 1,000 fathers. When you're successful, everybody's like, yeah, I believed in you, man. I always knew you could do it. Never doubted it, right? Failure is an orphan, right? When you fail, that's when no one even wants to be, they don't want to be associated with you. But while you're struggling, be careful who you talk with because they're going to be those naysayers who put that idea in your head. Frank, why are you struggling? Like, you could call them up tomorrow and have your job tomorrow. Like, why are you sitting at home living off savings when you could go do something great? So be careful who you share your ideas with. You will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. But here's the trick. If you learn from your mistakes, if you learn a lesson from them, by definition, they cease to be mistakes because you learn something. So even in the loss, you learn something. And if you learn something, it's no longer a mistake. But you will make mistakes. You're going to fall. You're going to break stuff. It's just how it happens. Final slide. This actually is the final slide. I always tell people the richest place in the world is the grave, right? Because there's so many books that were never written, so many businesses that were never started, so many shows that were never written because people died with it still inside of them. They were too scared to take that leap. They died with their ideas still inside of them. So the grave is the richest place. Too many people are scared. And my whole thing is there's nothing else you learn from me today. I'm asking you to be courageous, right? I'm asking you to have guts to take that leap, right? And if you do take that leap, if you do find your courage, you will make it to the promised land, right? And you should believe me because my journey is actually living proof. I'm happy. It was a rough road, but it was well worth it. It was well worth it. At this stage, I'll open it to any questions, comments. Yes, yes.
I know you said that your business is mostly in the Philadelphia area. Do you plan on expanding anywhere else? And like, how far do you want to get? How
Right.
big do you want to get if you do expand?
Scalability. I mean, that's really what you're asking me. The honest truth is we started out statewide, right? We were all over Pennsylvania. But when you spread yourself out that wide, remember what I said, spread yourself a mile wide and an inch, the quality, there's a tension between how much your geographic location and the quality. It's hard to monitor, like, you know, quality of service in Pittsburgh if I'm in Philadelphia. So what we did over the years is we shrunk it. So now we only focus on the 5 Philadelphia counties, right? There's about 6 million people who live in Philadelphia, right? I don't have to get all 6 million. Just a few hundred here and there will get me just fine. So yeah, you want to keep it within a localized area so you have more control of your workers and also of the quality of service. Yes. We'll start that with whoever.
So when you went into your job as a business consultant, did you know that eventually you were going to end up doing something like this?
Well, no, when I first started, remember what I said, I was on this path. I was just, this is what I'm supposed to do. And it wasn't until I actually started working. Couple that with Karl Marx's theory of alienation. That class, I keep telling Andrew, changed my life. But when I went in that, when I started being a business management consultant, after the first week, that's when I realized, you know what, nah. I mean, assuming I got 30, 40 years left, no.
How long did you stay there?
I was there for 2.5, 3 years, right?
And was there like a straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, that made you leave, or was it just gradual?
No, it was gradual. I mean, honestly, I was good there. I mean, they had no idea I was leaving. It was okay. I mean, the people were really nice. I had a great boss. But this is a kind of a litmus test. This is how you can kind of know if you're in the right position, or if you're on the right path. This is what happened to me. Every morning for those 2 years, right, the alarm goes off, and my first reaction was like, crap, I gotta go to work, right? So you should always analyze yourself right when you wake up, right? Because after you wake up, you start censoring your thoughts because you start coming to yourself. Your first thought before you're actually fully, completely awake is how you feel about your job, right? Because you haven't had time to start censoring your thoughts. So for me, every morning was like, God, I gotta go to work. And that's when I realized, you know what, this probably isn't where I'm supposed to be. That's just a trick I learned along the way. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Go ahead, sir.
We read a little bit about your research at Harvard.
Right.
How has that research been applied to your company?
Right.
And how do you plan to apply it in the future as well?
That's a good question. How do I say this without negating everything I studied? It's not necessarily, it's not the information you learned. After my dissertation, the day after my dissertation, right, I was the most knowledgeable person in my specific area in the world. It was probably like maybe 2 or 3 other people in the world who can compete with me in that area, right? After 2, 3, 4, 5 months, my research was outdated, right? Because that's how quickly information changes. So whatever degree you're getting, it's not the information that you learn that's important. Right? You saw that a calculus equation that was on there? At one point I could solve it, right? But it's not the information, it's how it makes you think. My engineering degree taught me how to create systems. My PhD taught me how to identify and solve problems. It also taught me the process of taking a huge project and solving it step by step. Moravia Health is one huge project that took 5 years, right? So even with Harvard didn't necessarily, I mean, I can't tell you what I learned there. I mean, but it was like the process, the way it helped shape your thinking, how you view and solve problems, right? So yes, all the degrees are important. I love my degrees. My degrees all played a huge role in who I am, but it wasn't the information. It's how they allow you to think about things, right? Does that make sense? Right.
I think you started from nonprofit and then went into the business.
Right.
But if you are in my place, like in our age, then we just start with nonprofit, or we just go straight to the business.
Remember what I told you in the beginning about there's no straight path. What works for me might not work for you. I really can't answer that question because everybody is different. Now, if it was me, the business is what I would do. I have no regrets about anything I did. Looking back on it now, I see how everything kind of played together, right? Without the business management, I wouldn't create the nonprofit. Without the nonprofit, it wouldn't have led to Moravia Health. There's this poem called Desiderata, right? One of the lines in the poem is, whether it's clear to you or not, the world is unfolding exactly how it should, right? Same thing with whatever path you choose. Eventually, if you have the ultimate goal in mind and you're working towards something, you can go left or right or left. Eventually, hopefully, you get to the same place. But for me, I'll keep everything the exact same, the way it played out. Oh, okay. I'm coming to you in a second. Let me try this. I'm neglecting this side. Give it to me.
What makes Moravia Health different from other home healthcare providers?
I'm biased. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? But one thing we are hearing from our clients is that we actually care, right? We still have that personal touch, right? We try to have like one-to-one relationships between our home health aides, the people who take care of the people, and our clients. Other agencies, I don't want to badmouth anybody because everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. But from what I've heard, the quality of service for Moravia Health is unmatched. And you can see it in the growth. I mean, don't be fooled by those numbers in the beginning. Not every home health agency is doing that, but we are. 8 figures in 1 year, that's a growth, so the numbers back it up. Yes?
So conceptually, when you began to design Moravia,
Right.
did you find that some of the concepts or ideas you wanted to put in that you couldn't execute? Because I feel like, when you start a venture or something, you have all these ideas and you
Right.
realize you can't do it all, but it's really hard to let go of something
Right.
that you really like and you want
Right.
to do.
Right. Well, again, my story, right? The hardest thing I've ever done in life, Allison backed me up, was my PhD, right? So after my PhD, there's nothing you can throw at me. I mean, honestly, that was the most difficult thing I've ever done. So everything after that was easy. But when we did start Moravia Health, we actually went overboard. We had all these certifications and we were doing every service available, right? Because we did overkill. But as you get more experience in the industry, you realize you don't want to do everything. Not everything is worthwhile. So over the years, we actually shrunk. Remember what I told you? You want to be an inch wide but a mile deep. You don't want to be a mile wide and an inch thick. So that's what we did. We took the mile and we shrunk it down to an inch, and we went deep in one specific area. How did I? Well, I told you what my superpower is. I can identify. So, I mean, honestly, the interview process isn't typical. We'll sit there and we'll just talk, right? And as the conversation progresses, you can kind of tell, like people who actually care about other people, who want to help people, right? So it's almost like people recognize kindred spirits. Well, they won't be here too long, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where we have to take your word for it at first, right? You might fool me for a day, you might fool me for a week, you might fool me for a month, but eventually the real person comes out. Unfortunately, fingers crossed, we really haven't had an issue with that, right? So far, our turnover is like maybe 1%. We might have lost like maybe 2 people, employees, and maybe like one patient out of the hundreds we have, right? So, yes.
So a little interview question for you. What would be your biggest failure, and then how did you come about it?
Wow, that's deep. That is deep. See, that's an interview question. That really is an interview question. I don't want to sit up here and say I'm arrogant and say I haven't had failures, because I have. It wouldn't be in business per se. That's a good question. Can I come back to that? Because honestly, it's not something I even think about nowadays. That is a really good question. Go ahead. But I will come back. Give me some time to think about that. That's great. Yeah.
Hi. So has anything kind of, I guess, challenged your passion? Because I know growing up as a kid, I played softball my entire life, and then and then I woke up every day, I was like, oh my God, I never want to do this ever again. And that really challenged how I felt, what I did for like my whole life. So has anything ever done that for you?
Well, the core doesn't change. Remember what I told you about you have to know yourself? The core is the same. I love helping people. Now, the people, sometimes the home health aides that we hire, some of those people are really frustrating. Like they show up late, they don't turn timesheets in, right? Little things, they sound little, but if you start taking the cumulative effect, it can drive you crazy. But knock on wood, I love what I do. I mean, honestly, I'm up at 5 o'clock every morning. You can ask my mother. She'll tell me that never used to happen. I'm up 5 o'clock off to work, loving what I do. So right now, no. I'm really happy. Nothing has challenged it so far, right? It's very difficult, though, when you get close to these clients, and just by virtue of the industry we're in, they die, right? Some of these people are like 98, 92, and so you get close to them, right? And then all of a sudden you get that phone call like, wow, she went in for surgery and she didn't make it, right? Had a young man 2 weeks ago. We had just talked on the phone, right? And then he went in for routine surgery and he didn't make it out. So the hardest thing for me, especially if you have a caring heart, is you have to almost draw boundaries between you and them, right? And it's difficult for me because you hear the person's phone on the voice on the phone, and they're crying to you and they're thanking you for all you've done, and then the next week they're no longer here. So it's really made me value life. Like, I don't take life for granted, right? The fact that I'm sitting here talking to you today, I don't take it for granted. The fact I can walk, the fact all y'all can walk, honestly, that you wake up every morning in your right mind with your arms and your legs, don't take it for granted. If you want this thing will change the way you look at the world. Promise. Sir. That's a good question. That was a hell of a question. How? Well, my family is in Delaware. How many people from Delaware here? How many people? Okay, we got one. How many people from Philly? Okay, so you know how close Delaware is, right? Okay, so Delaware for me, it's a 45 minute commute. The first choice was Delaware, but Delaware, the state, only has like 800,000 people in the entire, it's a small state, right? It's a small state. And that's the entire state from top to bottom. Philadelphia has 4.6 million people, and then you got the surrounding counties. So when you start just doing math, right, it's easier to get that amount of people, you know, it's easier to get a few hundred in Philadelphia versus Delaware, right? I mean, it's just a numbers game, honestly. And then my brother, he's a lawyer in Philly, so I mean, he taught me into it.
So why not New York or California?
Because my family's there, and I'm Nigerian. Don't forget that. My whole family, we're all we have. We're within 10 minutes of each other, the entire family. So me moving to New York was out of the question. My mom would kill me. How are we going to do this? Are we just going to go in? I mean, yeah, go ahead.
How would you describe like your average client?
My average client is, actually that is none, because it's half and half. The way the state divides it is above 60 and below 60. The above 60, I mean, they're pretty standard. Elderly, have some kind of debilitating injury or whatnot. Mostly African American, unfortunately, because Philadelphia is a predominantly black city. The under 60, those are actually the more sadder cases because these are people who are 24 years old who just had a stroke just out the blue, all right, or have some kind of muscular disease where they just all of a sudden stop walking. So there really is no typical patient per se. The one thing they all have in common is they have a physical disability. They're low income, right? But we have black, white, Asian, Latino. I mean, comes in all stripes. I need a system. I mean, honestly, what I'll do is I'll go like, I'll start alternating. Right. I'll alternate. I'll come to you in a second. Go ahead.
Oh, May?
Yeah.
For your, since you're passionate about your business,
Right.
and you work like a long week, how do you find time to take a second and relax? So I know even though this is your passion, it's
Right.
probably really stressful. So where do you find time, and like what do you do to relax and like calm yourself down?
Well, first of all, I do have a lot of friends. I love sports, right? Anytime if you're on Facebook with me, if you're my friends on Facebook, that's what I do. I talk Kobe. Who saw the game yesterday? Kobe scored 60 points. That was amazing. Golden State Warriors, 73 wins. That's how I relax, right? I mean, but work, I know I'm kind of dodging your question, but work to me is relaxing. Like Moravia Health is my Mona Lisa, right? So it's not work per se, because every time I go into the office, I'm like putting more strokes on like my masterpiece, right? This is my legacy. So yes, that's a generic answer, but I love sports. I do go out. I'm not a square. I mean, I hang out. You know what I mean? I hang out. Look, I was here at Penn State. I hung out.
Where do you see technology taking the healthcare field?
Honestly, everything is going to EDI, electronic data interchange. I mean, everything is going online, like in the clouds. How many people are familiar with HIPAA, the Privacy Act? Right. So HIPAA is forcing people, because each HIPAA violation is like $5,000 or $10,000, right? I think it's 10,000 for each violation you have. Something crazy. The number is ridiculous. And so by sheer virtue of that, it's making people go and, scanning everything into an electronic source, put it up in the cloud, where you have a third-party company who takes all the liability, who guarantee once you upload it to the cloud, it's safe, nobody's going to be able to break in. So in the future, it's already, a lot of it is already electronic. I think for us already, the only thing that's paper right now is the admission form, and that's only because they have to sign it. But even that, we're in the process of transitioning over to having them sign electronically. So we're 99.5% electronic now, and I think other companies are going to follow suit. Have you asked a question yet?
No.
Okay. You're next. I got you.
So, between your nonprofit and Moravia, were there any other projects that you wanted to start but you never got the chance, or did you always have Moravia in mind? Like, I know you were
Right.
doing the research,
Right.
but was that like your biggest contender? Did you have any other projects?
Nah. Remember what I told you about burning the ships, right? Now, in a lot of ways, I got lucky, right? Because I did the nonprofit. City ACES, my mom, she'll attest to this. I told her, Moravia Health came because of City ACES. City ACES came because of that existential crisis. Like, what the hell do I do? Like, okay, so I went the exact opposite, right? But even though it didn't succeed financially, it showed me like, okay, you can do something. So that was almost like the tester. Okay, you can create something. So I took maybe like 6 months to a year just thinking, right? So it's almost like you do like a pie chart, flow diagram. What do they call it? A flow chart? Right. What is an industry that's always going to have need? Okay, you do that. What is an industry where you don't necessarily have to rely on people who are flaky with, paying their bill? Medicaid, Medicare, right? So it's like I did that. I actually had a whole, like a whole thing on my wall where I was doing diagrams. And then once I figured out the healthcare industry, I heard about the Medicaid waivers for home health agencies. That's when I was like, okay, this is it. Figured out this is exactly what I want to do, and I went full bore, 100%. So in that sense, I didn't have a second act. I got lucky, partially lucky, I guess. A lot of it was research, I should say. So Moravia Health was my one shot and done, and that was it. It worked.
Do you have any plans for future businesses or nonprofits?
That's a good question. Because everybody who was involved with City ACES said we should bring it back, right? So I'm talking to a few of the mayors, and they want us to see us come back. So I may. I always like dealing with one thing at a time. Moravia Health does occupy all my time. 80 hours a week, it's probably 100-some hours a week, and it's fun to me. So right now, right now, I don't. My thing is, continue taking over Philadelphia. We are one of Philadelphia's fastest growing companies, bar none. Any industry, Moravia Health, we're known in Philadelphia. So I think I'll continue. Anything on this side? I'll continue in this field. Yes, ma'am.
How did you come up with the name?
Oh, good question. That's a second good question. That was a hell of a question. That really was. City ACES. Ray Rice. This was before bad Ray Rice. This was good Ray Rice. Before he did all that. It's a true story. On your way from Philadelphia to DC, there's a street named Moravia. City Aces, one of our last shows was on Moravia Street with Ray Rice. I'm going to say something which some of the guys might remember, some may not. It was a Monday night football game, and like Ray Rice ran for like 200 yards. It was a crazy game. And then the next day he came to do our talk, right? But when I was doing the show with him on that street named Moravia, a voice inside of me, I don't know what you want to call it, was like, remember that name, right? And so it ties in the winding down of City Aces with the new beginning, right? So Moravia always reminds me of the last show I did with City Aces. So whenever you're on 95 going from Philly to Baltimore and you see Moravia Road, keep this in mind. That's where it came from. Good question. Good question. Anything else? I'm going to buy you a drink. I really don't have an answer yet, but that was a stumper. After this, we're going to go get something to drink. Anything else? Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Had fun.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Frank, very much. So yeah, if you could go to this link here, if you did it in the beginning and you still want to turn on